No Extra Words listeners. As my 4-year-old has been saying to everyone he meets the last few days, Merry Christmas and Happy Advent. I hope this finds you well. We talked a little bit last time about how this may find you in all kinds of different places in life, and every Christmas has its own character. Some are very boisterous and very joyful, and some are the polar opposite. Wherever this one finds you, I hope you are sneaking in moments of peace amidst whatever else, big or small, loud or soft, is going on. As I record this, it's 10:15 on December 22nd. So much for being ahead of the game. I've spent the better part of the last 2 days on all of that last-minute holiday prep, some final shopping, some cooking, some cleaning. Have not yet tackled the wrapping, and there's plenty more of that to be done. I could have a bunch more projects tonight, but I needed to take a break and come talk to you for my own sanity, if for no other reason. Also, I did want to get this message to you kind of on time. The fourth week of Advent is all about love. And I'm choosing to interpret that for the purposes of the books I'm going to share with you today to be that home family tradition piece. What do you do with your holiday? Which is why I wanted to take a break from the stuff of mine to talk to you about the actions, because it's really easy to spend a lot of time on the former and forget about the latter. But at the end of the day, it's how you spend your time that really matters much more than the things you spend it on. So we're going to do a few books on some holiday traditions today and hope that you'll enjoy them as you're carrying out those traditions. When it comes to the culture of Christmas, or the culture of the United States, really, this is something that I hear a lot from people, that they are jealous of ethnic minorities who have a culture because they don't feel, white, waspy Americans don't feel like they themselves have a culture. And I can remember having this conversation in a college class I was once in, and it really frustrated one of the students in the class. She said, of course you have it. It's all around you. It's everything that we see is your culture. So that's why you don't necessarily need special holidays, special, social groups, things like that to celebrate it, because it's everywhere. Well, that's true. But I think it's also easy to feel like, really? That's all there is to my culture? It's just white bread and Game of Thrones and bologna sandwiches, and yeah, that's my culture. But I think when you look at American culture, it's not a monolith. There's all kinds of culture that crops up in different pockets of this country, having to do with regional differences, having to do with religious differences, having to do with racial and ethnic differences. And when you start to examine your own culture, I think you realize that what has been handed down to you has been handed down from the cultures of the people who came before you. A friend of mine invited another friend to make lefse, and I told her I don't think I've ever eaten good lefse, because my stepmother, God rest her soul, made bad lefse. And she said, well, you have to be taught it by a Norwegian grandmother, which she has, or it doesn't come out right. Well, that's culture, This is someone who's very waspy, middle America person, but that's the culture of her family, is the lefse that's been handed down. I got a message tonight from a friend of my mom's. This is our 24th Christmas without my mom. And she said, well, I was thinking of you tonight because I was watching White Christmas. I know that's your mom's favorite. Again, culture. It doesn't feel like it, but that's what our culture is in my family, in our corner of this behemoth of a country. So to that end, the first book I'm going to talk about, I have no idea where I got this book, honestly. I had forgotten that I had it. It was a surprise to me this year when I opened the boxes. And it's a coffee table book called Christmas in America. Very generic title. You open it up, and most of it is pictures. There are some pages in the front that talk about the sort of history of Christmas in America, the different settler groups that brought their different traditions, the English, the Germans, the Spanish, So there's some text in the beginning that kind of does a brief introduction, and then the rest of it is just pictures of a little bit of everything. There's carolers in Jackson Square in New Orleans. There's folks dragging a Christmas tree home through the snow in Vermont. There's the Capitol tree lighting in Washington, D.C. There's outdoor nativity scenes. There's Santa paddling a canoe at one point. There's Santa peeking through the binoculars in New York City Central Park. There's Rockettes. There's stockings. There's trees. There's just a little bit of everything about how people are celebrating Christmas in different parts of the country. And it's just a visual journey through that. The book was published in the 90s, and it looks more old-timey than that just because of the style of these pictures. And so it's just kind of fun to take a peek at Christmas around the country and what it looks like in different places depending on the weather, whether you're in a big city or a small town, you know, whether your Christmas is seeing a big show at Radio City Music Hall or hand-stitching a stocking to hang by your chimney. Those are all parts of Christmas traditions for people. And it's just a fun thing to kind of leaf through and remember that this country doesn't have a culture. This country has many, many, many cultures that all have blended together and informed one another and influenced one another and continue to do so. I don't know about you, but my family's culture and traditions have changed as we've added new generations, as people have married in. It's not a Christmas tradition, but an Easter tradition of one particular part of my family is to do cascarones, which is eggs filled with confetti and such. And I don't think it's necessarily an Easter tradition specifically. It's a Mexican tradition. And when their daughter married a man of Mexican descent, he brought that tradition into the family. And so instead of hunting for chocolate Easter eggs, they hunt for these confetti-filled eggs. And then, of course, the kids throw them at each other. So our culture continually grows and expands and stretches and accommodates as we inform each other of the things that we do and how we do them. And then there are things that are just unique to your corner of the world. And that's a good thing, and that should be celebrated. So that's Christmas in America by Nancy S. Grant. A reminder, all of these books are on Instagram, instagram.com/noextrareads, the hashtag 24 books of Advent. So you can see what they look like. They come straight out of the collection. So they're there with their scratches and dings and missing dust jackets and all the rest. And I've also put the entire collection on Goodreads. I'm about 20 books now as of this recording from finishing putting the entire collection on a shelf over on Goodreads. It's goodreads.com/noextrawords if you want to see all the holiday books I've got and be a buddy over there. Would love to have you. It is a winter holiday collection. As I've said before, it's primarily Christmas because that's what my family celebrates. But there are also snowmen books in there, and there are some Hanukkah books. And one of my all-time favorite Hanukkah books is Lemony Snicket's The Latke Who Couldn't Stop Screaming, A Christmas Story. I think Lemony Snicket has another Christmas book as well, which is on my list to get. But I love this one. This is truly a picture book for all ages. I have read this to kids as young as 9 or 10. I would completely read this to adults. I love the way it begins. This story ends in someone's mouth, but it begins in a tiny village more or less covered in snow. And that's where the Latke is being born. So throughout the entire book, this Latke starts screaming as he runs through the woods. Because he jumps out of the frying pan, runs out the door, and then as he goes on his journey of screaming, he comes across many, many symbols of Christmas. He comes across a candy cane, some lights, a tree, and they all think he's really cool, and they try to say how he could be part of the Christmas tradition, and he keeps trying to explain to them that he's something else entirely and has nothing to do with Christmas. And my favorite part is when the tree, let me see if I can get the exact quote here. He says to the tree, "Christmas and Hanukkah are completely different things, but different things can often blend together," said the pine tree. "Let me tell you a funny story about pagan rituals," which I just love because it speaks to the fact that all of these traditions have come from all kinds of strange places. And at the end, the Latke finds exactly his right spot in his particular holiday. And the book ends with, "On a cold, snowy night, everyone and everything should be welcome somewhere. And the Latke was welcomed into a home full of people who understood what a Latke is and how it fits into its particular holiday. And then they ate it." It's a delightful book. It's hilarious. Just simple little illustrations. And it also pokes at that idea of tradition, of all these things that we're surrounded by and what they actually mean and how they mean different things to different people. So that's Lemony Snicket's The Latke Who Couldn't Stop Screaming a Christmas Story. And now we're going back to poetry. We haven't done poetry in a while. This is also new to the collection. This one I actually know where it came from because my friend who gave it to me wrote on a post-it note inside it, "Chris, this author won a Pulitzer for her writing and also wrote The Year Without a Santa Claus." It was gifted to me by a friend who gave me a bunch of Christmas books for my kids. And this was just slid in there, and I really didn't pick it up until this Christmas. It is poetry. My copy's old, so it's a little faded around the edges, but it's got tricolor illustrations, which are quite nice. And it takes on different parts of the country and different eras of time, how Christmas is celebrated in New England, how it's celebrated in the Southwest, how it's celebrated in New Amsterdam, and how it's celebrated in the Victorian era, with just little poems and pictures. And it feels old because it is old, but that doesn't make it any less fun. It's a fun little thing it's a nice sampling of Christmas in America, its history, sort of a less pictures, more words, but in poetry version of the book we started with. So that's Mince Pie and Mistletoe by Phyllis McKinley. Now, for me, one of the biggest parts of Christmas is the music. And that's why I stole this next book. I didn't steal it. I borrowed it from my dad's house and never brought it back. But that's okay. He is trying to downsize his books anyway, so I've gotten him one less. It actually belonged to my stepmother, God rest. We have had several rough Christmases in a row in my family. Relatives with health scares at Christmas. And that started in Christmas of 2015, when my stepmother, who was battling cancer at the time, 3 days after Christmas was hospitalized for the last time, and she passed away in February of 2016. This was her book, and one of the things that she and I had in common was music. We were both singers, and this had lived on her piano for a really long time, and I finally picked it up and started reading it. This is "Oh Come Let Us Adore Him," and it's the history of some of our most iconic. The subtitle is "Stories Behind the Most Cherished Christmas Hymns." It's by Robert J. Morgan, who's apparently the best-selling author of Then Sings My Soul, a book I have never read. This really focuses on the religious music of Christmas. It, I believe, is from a Christian publisher. Most of the songs I'd heard of, but not all. There's one, "From Heaven Above to Earth I Come," which I didn't know. And there's one that I didn't know was Christmas, "Of the Father's Love Be God." And I don't think of that as Christmas. But there's a lot in here that you will remember, or that you will know. "O Come All Ye Faithful," "Joy to the World," "Silent Night, the First Noel," "Go Tell It on the Mountain," "Good King Wenceslas." Kind of goes in order based on the year the songs were written. And so there's a little bit of a 2-page spread that says the history of how each one came to be. And then there's a sheet music for each one, just in hymn style, so 4-part harmony chords. And then there are scripture verses as well associated with most of them. It's kind of fun. A lot of the stories I knew Silent Night. I knew several of them, or at least had heard of several of them, how they came to be. But it is interesting. It's one of those wonderful things that you can dabble, because each hymn is 2 pages long, so you can just kind of skim through and see the history of the songs. Definitely more the religious side of Christmas, but music and Christmas to me just are so inextricably linked. And things I didn't know that I knew. Like, why do I know the second verse to "O Little Town of Bethlehem"? I think it's because in my church growing up, the program was exactly the same for every Christmas Eve service. It's probably still the same. I haven't been to Christmas Eve service at that church in a while, but I'm guessing it's still the same. And it had the same hymns in it. And we would sing we're Lutheran. So Lutherans are known, we sing all the verses. And so we would sing all 4 verses of all of the hymns, and somehow those are ingrained in my head. I wonder sometimes what I would have room for in my head if I didn't have all this stuff rattling around in there. But I do. So that's "Oh Come Let Us Adore Him" by Robert J. Morgan. And I'm keeping it in the holiday book collection in honor of my stepmother, God rest, and hoping this Christmas for some peace. We're just really hoping to make it through past the new year with everybody staying healthy. So fingers crossed and big prayers for that. Fortunately, we haven't had, knock on wood, we haven't had a death since then, but we've had some definite health scares and people in the hospital at Christmas in the year since then. So we're hoping to avoid that this time around. But we miss people at Christmas, and it's nice to have. I have one of her children's Christmas books in the collection as well. The other ones got passed on to my kids' preschool teachers, but I saved the Jan Brett Christmas Treasury that had been hers. So we remember a lot of people at Christmas. Remember my mom, who's been gone this is our 24th Christmas without her. This is our third Christmas without my stepmother. This is, I think it's our fourth Christmas without my husband's grandmother. So we always remember those who are no longer with us. And I think it's important to acknowledge the sad in and amongst the joyful. Moving away from that a little bit, several of the books I talked about in this 24 Books of Advent were picked by the 4-year-old, including this one. And he and I just shared this. This was the first Christmas that I had read this one. And I really like this book. I didn't really know what to expect of it. It's a golden book. It's a newer golden book. So a lot of the golden books are from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. This one actually is from the 80s. And I picked this up at an antique show a couple of years ago. It was one of those things where the more golden books I bought, the less they were going to cost me. So I cleaned them out of all the Christmas ones I could find. And this is The Biggest, Most Beautiful Christmas Tree. And it's by Amye Rosenberg. And it is the story of a very big fir tree with a bunch of animals living in it. The animals know of Christmas and they celebrate Christmas, but Santa never comes. And their wonderful Aunt Mim, who's delightful, says, well, maybe it's because he doesn't know that you're here. You have to figure out how to let him know that you're here. And they think if they decorate this big tree, then he will know, and he will know to come and find them. And so they turn this beautiful fir tree into a big, giant Christmas tree in the forest. And it's really cute. I love it. That act of decorating the tree is such a family by family thing, how you do it and who gets to pick what goes where. And in my family, one of the big ones was we had 2 angels that could both go on the top. And so we got to take turns year by year in picking which angel would be at the top this year. My husband's family always listened to the Muppets Christmas with John Denver when they decorated their tree. And so that's the first. My husband is not a tree decorator. He helps me get it standing, and then he'll help a little bit, but he really leaves the decorating to me and the 4-year-old. But he'll make sure that the Muppets Christmas with John Denver is playing while that happens. And some people need their ornaments to match. I buy the people in my family a used ornament every year from a thrift store or an antique store. That way, if they decide they don't like them, then I haven't lost anything or hurt the environment too much. We've just recycled old ornaments and we can recycle them back to thrift stores and antique stores. I was gifted an ornament every Christmas by my aunt, and I still have many of them. And my mom gave me some as well. And then there are the ornaments that come home from the preschool that he's worked so hard to make. And so this act of tree decorating is so personal, family by family. And these animals have never done it. So they turned their home, which is a tree, into a big, beautiful Christmas tree. It's just an adorable, sweet little book. And I'm glad that James picked it for me to share it with you guys. That's The Biggest, Most Beautiful Christmas Tree by Amye Rosenberg. Last up, I can't believe this is our 24th book of this special podcast series. And it seems very appropriate. I'm slated to share this book on Instagram on Christmas Eve. I'm hoping I remember to do it. I've been a little off on some of my days. But this is The 24 Days Before Christmas, An Austen Family Story by Madeline L'Engle. Yes, that Madeline L'Engle. If you don't know Madeline L'Engle, I did a podcast episode all about her and A Wrinkle in Time. That's episode 106. We talked about A Wrinkle in Time. I had a special guest in studio. We talked about A Wrinkle in Time and about Madeline L'Engle. She wrote several books about the Austens. I believe the one that I read as a child was Meet the Austens. I'm going to have to go back and look. But this is an Austen's family prequel. And it's walks the line between novella and picture book. It's 48 pages long. It doesn't really have chapters. It has kind of section dividers. It's illustrated, but not as heavily illustrated as would be a picture book. You can read it in one sitting. I certainly have. You can also break it up. But the Austen family is much younger than, if you're familiar with the Austens, it's much younger than you know them. And they talk about, starting with the 1st of December, December is such a big deal for this family because every day in December, they do something special to prepare for Christmas. And so they'll sort of get up the first morning in December just so excited to start this tradition. And they have an advent calendar and they have a special book that they read. So every day they do something special. Maybe it's bake cookies. Maybe it's make garlands for their tree. Maybe it's very, very much an Advent book, which I really like because Advent is something, in case you can't tell, that we do big in my family as well. And that's something that I really try to do with my own kids is we try to focus on a thing. And I don't have them pre-planned because I need the flexibility to be able to say, okay, today Mama is tired. Today our thing will be small. Today our thing will be setting up the manger scene. Whereas a different day, it might be going to see Santa or making cookies or something like that. Or writing Santa. And we don't always limit it to one because it gets crazy towards the end. But we really try to focus on one thing at a time. And I like this about this family. And it also captures that busyness as well. Because Mama's about to have a baby. And, this is a family that's busy getting ready for Christmas, getting ready for the Christmas play, all of that kind of stuff. And the weather is a factor. And so it's not just as simple as this family celebrating Advent, and look, this mom has looked on Pinterest and found exciting things to do. It is, as families are, much more complex than that. And it's a lovely story. It's Madeline L'Engle. You can't beat Madeline L'Engle. And I really like that I bookended these 24 days with Advent with these 24 books of Advent with two iconic authors. So we started, if you'll remember, way back on special number 21, we started with J.R.R. Tolkien's The Father Christmas Letters. In honor of J.R.R. Tolkien, I am currently at work on a letter from Santa for my 4-year-old. I'm hoping to start that as a tradition, that every Christmas he will write Santa a letter. And then on Christmas morning, he'll get a letter back from Santa in his stocking. This is the first year I'm attempting to do it because it's the first year it will mean anything to him. But we started with that, and then we're ending with Madeline L'Engle's The 24 Days Before Christmas. So those are my 24 books of Advent. It's a slice of the collection. I think it probably will end up being about a fifth-ish of the collection. Like I say, I've got 20 some odd books left to shelve in my Goodreads account to make the collection complete over there. I think I had 4 new additions to the collection this year, which is high, but not abnormal. 1 book that I bought intentionally, and then 3 that I found along the way. So it grows, it's ongoing, and after the new year, come Epiphany time, they will go back in their boxes and they will go back in the closet because I like having them come out for a special time of year, and I also don't have the shelf space to keep them out year round. But we will continue to talk books and story on Instagram and Goodreads. The current plan is for the podcast to be back after the first of the year. I'm not at this moment committing myself to a release date, but we will be back sometime in January with season 3, so watch the social media for that. We are at No Extra Words everywhere, but I think especially focus on Twitter and Instagram. Those are great places to follow us if you're on either of those places. You can also always check out our website where we have show notes and all the details, noextrawords.wordpress.com, and you can always shoot me an email, noextrawords@gmail.com. Tell me what your favorite book of the season is and what's on your mind. Wow. We did it, guys. We did 4 episodes and 24 books of Advent. I don't know how we made it through December, to be honest with you. I hope you're having a wonderful holiday and that you're cozy somewhere with wool socks, unless you're in the Southern Hemisphere, in which case I hope you're on a beach somewhere with a nice cocktail or whatever it is that floats your boat this time of year. I hope you're having wonderful holidays, finding yourself some stories along the way, and I will talk to you in the new year. Oh my goodness. Have a great one.